Hello.
Hi.
Really?
Hey, how you doing?
Great. How are you?
Okay.
All right. It's 6:01. I will call the meeting to order. I will say I have a bit of a heavy heart because I really admired Hal's leadership. I felt like he was steady and informed, and I will do my best to emulate him, and I hope all of you will help me to try to do that. I will take roll. John?
Here.
Suzanne?
Present.
Mike?
Present.
Marilee?
Here.
Ted? Okay, we're waiting on Ted. Did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Did anyone have any comments or changes to those minutes? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion that be approved.
Thanks, John.
Second.
Great, thanks, Marilee. John will be voting for them, clearly. Suzanne?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Marilee, you're
Aye.
clearly counted as voting for them? Great. Minutes are approved. Do we have any announcements?
I just wanted to do a quick announcement. This is Shelley. Wanted to let you guys know that last week Planning Board and Town Council both voted to approve the updated design development lists that you guys saw with the changes that were suggested to me by a couple of people. Everybody thought that they did a great job and they really appreciated the new format, and I wanted to let everybody know I appreciated your feedback.
Thank you, Shelley.
Right.
Thanks.
And then I also promised to let you guys know when rezonings were headed to council that you guys have already heard. And I'll give you an update once they've been heard. But the Abbey Spring rezoning, which was the one next to Walgreens on Williams and Olive Chapel, is going to town council next week. They've incorporated a number of conditions, and we've worked with them to take your recommendations and make them zoning conditions that we can enforce. And then we also have, actually, I think that's the only one right now. We have one other that submitted just beforehand, but I'll give you an update when that's ready to go to council and everything. And then the Williams Farm property, which was up on Green Level West, I think. I get Green Level West and Green Level Church confused. Next to the Lake Castleberry subdivision, that one got submitted this month for staff review, and they have included all of those conditions, and we're kind of working on phrasing with them. So just as an FYI, don't want you guys to think that what you're doing isn't important.
That's great. Thank you, Shelley. That's really good news. Does anyone else have any other announcements? Great. Megan, I think we'll send it to you for committee updates.
Great. Thanks, Katie. So a couple updates for both Tree Cap and Bee City Committee. Starting with Tree Cap, as Shelley mentioned, the design and development manual was approved for the updated trees and shrubs list that you all looked at. Also, they kind of quietly planted 6 trees for the 6th year as a tree city. And they planted those trees at Claremont Park, which is a neighborhood park in Apex. National Arbor Day is technically April 30th, so I think that they might convene over in that area, but they don't have any specific plans. They are trying to launch a new program for a tree planting grant program, which should be really interesting. I don't know if Suzanne wants to jump in and add anything on that before I move on to Bee City, because I know that you've attended the meetings as well, and you might. I want to give you the opportunity to add.
Yeah, it just sounded pretty preliminary, but it is really exciting. And it sounded like it's geared, at least initially, towards individual homeowners versus HOAs. So for some of the, the folks in HOAs who don't necessarily have space on their property itself, perhaps later on they were discussing opening it up to them. But it sounded pretty preliminary, but it is very exciting. So I hope it does get some good support.
Yes.
Great, thank you. And jumping into Bee City, they have quite a few things going on. So with updates on the Nature Park Pollinator Garden, next week they are meeting, I believe, on Wednesday to discuss the layout and design phase of the garden. Hopefully, they're thinking about getting that done around Pollinator Week, which is June 21st to the 27th. They're also planning a neighborhood yard recognition program. And yes, and the criteria there involves creating food for pollinators, water, shelter, safeguarding the habitat, and minimizing pesticide use. So that is optional for neighborhoods, residential areas, and corporate areas. So that's really exciting. Also hoping to launch that during Pollinator Week. They have elected their first chair this yesterday, actually. And they were speaking about Peak Fest. So Peak Fest is usually the first weekend in May, which of course, due to COVID, didn't occur last year and is not occurring at that time this year, but it has been announced for September 11th, that's Saturday this year. So I just wanted to put that out there, not just because Bee City is talking about it, but also to give you the opportunity and plant the seed of, perhaps the Environmental Advisory Board would like to be out there. So, we will certainly support you on that, and won't take up any more of your time, but those are my announcements. Thank you.
This is Marilee, can I jump in one real quick and say yay, because I'm getting a beehive. Woohoo! So I definitely want to attend.
Awesome, congrats.
Megan, I think actually we send it back to you again for board membership updates.
Yes, I pretty much summed it up in my email to you all. But I just wanted to create an agenda item here if you have any questions or concerns about the membership updates. Again, we should have a new member come April at the very least, and hopefully we'll have all three so that we have a full board of 9 members. Any questions or concerns about that? Just want to open the floor.
I'll jump in real quick, guys, and I'll just echo Katie's sentiment for wishing Hal a happy retirement from the EAB. I think he helped pave the way, and Katie, with your co-leadership along the way, helped get us to where we are now. I know there's been some discussions over email, or just from Megan, about interest in vice chair. I'd be willing to support John, you or Suzanne as well for that, or Marilee as well. I just wanted to let y'all know I'm not going to be able to put in an extra shoulder time commitment for that, but I think the board is in a really good spot, and I would feel comfortable supporting anybody currently on the board who is interested in making that jump. So my last piece, and then I'll be quiet, sorry, is Katie, you stepping up is huge. I commend you for that. I know it's an extra commitment. Not sure if you were prepared for that or not, but we'll certainly support you in any way we can in this role. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I second everything Mike said.
I will definitely miss out. I think we all will.
Is there a particular date? I know you said they'll start in April, and considering that this is the 18th, what is your need to know by? You're not talking about the last day in March, are you?
Well, so this will need to go to council and be put on the agenda by the 6th of April. And in order to be put on the agenda, I need to know by Tuesday, the 30th of March.
All right, thank you.
That's helpful. Thanks, Megan. Thank you. So please, if anyone wants to communicate their interest to Megan, please send her an email by the 30th of March. And I appreciate a few of you have already communicated, so I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. I have a question, Megan, for you and for Shelley before we do the first pre-app meeting. Perhaps it's a question that other people have encountered. Now that we can see the comment letters, which I really appreciate, I think they're extremely helpful. I think we can see that often the comment letters touch on things that we might touch on also. To what degree should we reiterate what we see in the comment letter? Should we echo it? Or to what degree should we treat that as already having been addressed?
That's honestly up to you all, because we know as the TRC staff, because we know some of what you all are interested in seeing, we've kind of been directed, but also kind of taken the liberty of letting applicants know that in advance so that they can be considering those options. They do have that list of suggested conditions on the pre-application meeting application. That's a very awkward title, but you know what I mean. But this just gives us one more kind of like, hey, here are the things that we've heard are important. Sometimes we phrase it in terms of this is a particular concern for town council. Sometimes it's, here's some guidance on some phrasing for conditions that we have seen get approved in the past. Because as we've discussed before, one of the drawbacks of the list, and it's also one of its strengths as well, is that it is kind of in a bullet point list format, but the details in there are not specific to be enough to be enforceable. So some of what we're doing is giving them a heads up that this will still be something that they have to deal with at the EAB. And sometimes we're also giving them suggested language that they could consider so that maybe they're a little more prepared when they come to see you. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for you guys to reiterate any conditions that you think are particularly important or any suggestions. I think since your role is to make recommendations for conditions to the rezoning, that if you leave something off that's on the TRC comment letter, it may be viewed that that's not a part of your recommendation for that particular project. Because the TRC comments come from staff, we're trying to anticipate what you're saying. You don't have to spend a lot of time on them. You could say something like, we're aware that you got a comment from staff about adding solar. We also agree that this should be included. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out thing. It can just be, hey, we've seen this on your TRC comments. We agree that this needs to be we agree that this is a recommendation.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, because I was reading over this earlier and I was like, well, dang, they don't need us. Because it was all very well put and I felt very inclusive.
Well, good. We try to make sure that things are as comprehensive as we can. I don't remember. Megan, did you send, I'm trying to find it and I can't right now. For the C-Store one, I accidentally didn't add some of the comments that I intended to before we sent out a comment letter to the applicant. Did you send the EAB the revised letter, or it should say comment letter 01 additional comments?
I am 100% sure, yes. I was about to say 99 and then
okay.
I
just couldn't find the email. I've got entirely too many of them on my list. Perfect then. That's all I was double checking on.
Shelley, can I follow up on that? I think I understood you perfectly. I noticed in the comment letter for the C-Store, there was a mention of public art. That is not technically what our committee does, but the public art committee is not going to meet with the applicant. So is that also something that we should repeat?
I don't think that's within the bounds of what should be listed in your recommendations. Great. If you like the idea, you can make that comment as a personal aside. The Public Art Committee has a map that lays out the areas in Apex where public art is required to be installed when it gets developed. So they've actually gone through and they've just kind of created a guidance document that staff then enforces. And when they propose their particular art piece, it will actually be taken to I think anyway, I'm not the liaison for that, so I could be mistaken, but I think that piece of art is actually taken to the art committee for feedback, or is at least emailed to them for feedback. If not, it's definitely reviewed by planning staff and the planning director, and then we make sure the other TRC members get a chance to look at it to make sure that it's mostly just to make sure it's not going to get in the way of the right of way and that kind of thing. But I do think that we try to get feedback from the art committee on those pieces.
Great.
So if you want to say, hey, you can make some environmental art out here, as a personal aside, I think that's totally fine. I just don't think it should be confused as being in your list of recommendations.
Understood. Okay. I just wasn't sure since I knew that committee did not have a standing meeting. Mm-hmm. That's very helpful. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments before we meet with the Kelly Woods applicants? Okay. Megan, I think we're ready.
All right, for Kelly Woods, we have 3 individuals, Adam Ashbot, Emily Rothrock, and Stephen Freeman, and I will admit them now.
Hi, do we have the Kelly Woods representatives here on the call?
I believe so.
Great. Your screen is being shared, so I just can't see you. My name is Katie Schaff. I am the vice chair of the EAB. Welcome. We would love to hear a bit about your project, please, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions.
Stephen?
Adam, you there?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you'd want me to go ahead or if you want to take the lead.
Sure, I'm happy to. My name is Stephen Freeman with AMH Development. We are a subsidiary of American Homes. You see the logo there in the bottom of the image. We're working with ESP on this plan. The program and goal is, as you can see, single-family home lots divided in 2 phases. We'll probably talk about it today, but with the idea of a pedestrian link between the 2, just given the nature of the design and the wetlands in between. But these will be single-family homes, which will be for rent within the community. And with appropriate materials, exteriors will be hardy plank siding with a combination of stone or brick, and with the appropriate energy efficiency standards that you would expect. As part of our program, all homes, we sod the yards completely. That's one of the items that was on your list, but that's something we do as standard and would be happy to include.
Can you tell us how many units it is?
This plan shows, I believe, 42. And we are looking at the potential to pick up just a little bit more that may take that to 44, but it should not, it will not exceed more than 45 overall for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if I could weigh in a little bit on the zoning aspect of it, this plan would be within the medium density residential zoning classification. That's consistent with the comprehensive plan designation for this area. We've had pre-application meetings with the town staff, engineering, transportation, and we're preparing a rezoning application and neighborhood meeting notice that will go out with the intention of submitting a rezoning the 1st of next month.
Okay. I see there are certain conditions that you've already mentioned, mostly regarding plantings and trees. Can you tell us more about those?
Let's see. Emily, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to go over those items?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't have the list in front of me, but if you do, or if somebody on the environmental advisory board has those, I mean, we'd be happy to respond to what we've already submitted.
Who is sharing the screen right now?
That's actually me. My name is Shelley Mayo. I'm the planning staff liaison.
Okay.
So I'm just showing I can try to pull up the list that you all sent.
That would be great. I'm happy to go through all that.
That's not what I needed. 1 second. Sorry about this.
That's all right.
Pull it up.
Hey, I think I found it. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
So we reviewed some of the options that you offer, and we talked about these in conjunction with the layout that we have. We think that in terms of the design and the way that the design is working, that some of these would be pretty simple to incorporate. And then we've also included some things that we could do as an additional intention of meeting some of the options that you've offered. So in terms of preserving tree canopy with all the buffers and perimeter boundaries, we would definitely look to make sure that anything that is feasible to be protected and outside of any of the necessary construction limits would be preserved, and no unnecessary disturbance would take place. And that would include the proper tree protection and information to contractors. Deciduous shade trees located on the south side of structures. We reviewed this with the plan, and we think that there's opportunity to definitely include that. Some of those may just fall in place based on code guidelines, and some of them may make sense in terms of additions to the layout. So we would definitely include that as something to consider as we develop this design. Native selections and habitat supportive to species and pollinators, also seasonal succession and native wildlife. That's definitely something that at ESP we look at as important to our designs. I think it aligns with the way we do planting selection and planting design, and also it aligns with the maintenance that, you know, we'd be looking for: lower impact, no unnecessary irrigation, and all the things that fall in line with that. Preserving areas outside of new construction. Again, that kind of falls in line with what I talked about above, but that is something that whenever we do a conceptual layout, we look at the land and we look at what the land, how the land really wants to be respected. So in every way possible, we work with, you know, Stephen to figure out how we can have the least impact to those areas. I think we talked about the irrigation. As Stephen mentioned, they sod everything, and warm season grasses are definitely a preferred option. So that's a good one that aligns with our project proposal. I think number 7 falls in line with the native species and diversity. Installation of signage, that would be something that Stephen mentioned he would be open to. So making sure to limit access or at least point out environmentally sensitive areas. And we looked at some of the low impact development techniques. Depending on what we find about the site as we move this forward. That's definitely an option where it is practical. So we've listed that as something that we would consider as we move this forward. We need a little bit more information on determining how that can be applied, but we will consider that as we go forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I do have one question of the board, more of a guidance thing, if you guys can provide some. On number 1, where we're saying that we're going to preserve the tree canopy within all buffers. I mean, all is a very sensitive word, but to the extent that we don't have impacts to the buffers for grading or for stormwater control measures, as Stephen mentioned, because of the way the site is bifurcated by the existing buffered stream through the middle, one of the things that we've been talking about with planning staff is providing some kind of pedestrian connection through that buffer area. There is an existing trail road, and so there's already a culvert over the stream, and we're looking at maybe utilizing that trail as a pedestrian connection to link the two sides of the property. Don't have any intention of building a roadway across there, but to make it an all-inclusive neighborhood, we think it's a good idea to add some kind of pedestrian connection there. So I guess I'm looking for your guidance as to whether that proposed condition should be reworded somehow to incorporate those design features that I talked about.
I'm glad you mentioned the pedestrian walkway, because that was actually my next question. And I'll let Shelley weigh in on the specifics of your question.
I'm going to share the town's aerials real quick in the area just to make certain that I'm looking at the same thing that you are, Adam, or that you've mentioned. So these are the 2 lots that are part of this development. We can see the stream kind of coming down through here a little bit. If I zoom in, I think this is the trail that you were talking, the kind of existing trail. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And you can see the sewer easement that's already impacting a portion of that stream as well. Right. So one of the things we talked about, I don't remember, Shelley, if you were on that pre-application call, but one of the things we talked about with staff and even with the Parks and Rec group was the potential of that sewer easement becoming some kind of pedestrian corridor that the town might want to enhance. But at a minimum, we would want to utilize that trail road and stream crossing as a pedestrian connection between the two sides of the neighborhood.
So what I would recommend as far as zoning conditions go would be to slightly rephrase that to say, so I would say preserve the tree canopy within all buffers and perimeter boundaries, with the exception of the pedestrian pedestrian amenities and town utilities, something to that nature.
I see. Okay. How about
and then you might want to add a statement that says that you would preserve the tree canopy to the maximum extent possible within that. And I'm sorry, I realized you were talking when I was halfway through. I apologize.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I just wanted to also add in that there's very likely to be a little bit of grading, not into the noose portion of the buffer, but in the town very outer edge of the buffer. There may be some grading that we need to do for stormwater treatment facilities and things of that nature. So yeah, I appreciate your feedback, Shelley. We will reword that to say something to the extent of as where practical, something like that, as opposed to just using that blanket term all. We'll try to come up with some language that makes more sense.
Okay. And when you submit that, staff will work with you on that as well. So we'll help you get something that works for everybody.
Thank you both. Do other members of the board have questions?
Well, I was just going to ask, are you planning to use any particular sort of street lights and terms of keeping the light from shining upward at night to focus downward?
I guess I'll try to answer that. We have not had discussions as of yet with Duke Energy. These would be your standard low voltage neighborhood lights. If we do, and I would suspect that for safety reasons, yes, there would be some street lighting on the internal local streets, but we'll probably, Stephen, unless you think otherwise, we'll probably utilize the standard Duke Energy pole.
Yeah, that's what we would do. I think that's what we've done on our other Apex community.
Just to point out, generally speaking, the typical lamp that they put on those does meet the town standard for full cutoff and doesn't allow any upward direction of the light. So the board has been discussing dark sky compliance type concerns and has specifically looked at dark sky, and I think that's where Marilee was coming from. Basically, you would need to commit to not using acorns and making sure that the lighting is directed downward, I think. Is that correct, Marilee?
Yes, I believe so, yes, without going back and looking over that document.
Are y'all willing to commit to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there going to be an HOA in charge of this development, or do y'all have any plans for that?
Yes, we would set up an HOA to govern and maintain the properties. As part of our program, we would also cover and maintain all the exterior maintenance of the yards and homes as well.
Sure. One thing I noticed when you were talking about number 8 on your proposal, you discussed the signage to address pet waste. Would y'all be considering any pet stations for disposal of the waste?
To be considered. All our homes are fenced, so everyone will have a private yard. But that's something we would certainly entertain.
Yeah, we'll look at the ability to add that maybe at the entrance to each of these pedestrian connections from either side, as people would approach, that walkway.
Right. Yeah, I've got a dog that doesn't like to use my fenced yard, so. Who knew?
You need to teach them to read the signs.
I think given the stream and the fact that you'll have the walkway that I expect people will enjoy, I think the pet waste stations will be important.
Yeah, I'll agree.
I had a question just sort of about the layout of the homes. I noticed that some of the lots appear to be bigger than the ideal that you showed in the inset map that we were provided. On those lots that are bigger than, I think the ideal you had was like 105 feet by 52 feet, are the homes going to be bigger on those lots, or are all the homes going to be about the same size?
They'll be within the same program that we've planned for, which is a unit mix of 3, 4, and 5 bedroom homes. But they would all be of the same character and design, and just some of those would benefit from a larger yard. Okay, and so would there be enough space in a yard, do you think, on at least some of the homes for the homeowners, if they wanted to plant shade trees of their own that didn't have any conflicts with the utilities or the easements or anything like that? These will all be corporately owned and managed. Okay. So it would be based on the site plan with that. But we typically when there's an oversized yard, will bring the fence in. So there might be some opportunity to put some plantings in some of those outer line areas surrounding the fences.
Okay, and the second question I had is, you mentioned possibly using the culvert as a pedestrian walkway. Is it? I'm curious if that would meet sort of safety standards for a pedestrian thing, and if not, would you? Are you going to put in some sort of bridge that sort of spans the creek?
Right now it's a driveway.
Folks, Suzanne, the idea would be there's an existing gravel driveway with a culvert.
Okay.
And so, no, the intention would not be to bridge something. There's already an impact there. And so the intention would be that we would utilize that gravel trail that's already existing as our pedestrian walkway.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, so is the culvert, I'm assuming, is sized appropriately for the creek, and you're not going to end up with any flooding or overwash issues?
Yeah, I haven't heard any instances or any historical perspective from the homeowner that would lead us to believe otherwise.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from the board? So I think there are two recommendations from the board beyond your proposed zoning conditions, and these are recommendations both to think about the lighting pointing downward and to not be using acorn lights, and also to be adding petway stations in order to protect the stream. Are there other recommendations from the board that I may have missed? Great. Would anyone on the board like to make a motion on this package of recommendations?
I'll make a motion to approve or vote.
Thanks, Mary Lee.
Second.
Was that Mike?
Yes.
Okay, great. I will vote in favor. John?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
Mike and Mary Lee
Aye.
should both be ayes, I believe.
Yep.
And did we get Ted on the call?
Ted is not on.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Great, that has passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
All for your recommendations. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck.
Switching my papers over.
Just to clarify, guys, I'm going to be sharing my screen again. I think I've pulled up everything for that. I should probably tell you in the future when I'm sharing that.
I think it's super useful to see those really
Yes.
high definition aerial photography that you all have.
Absolutely.
All right, are we ready for the next pre-application meeting?
I believe we are. Thank you.
All right, Apex C-Store. We have one representative from that project joining us, and it's Brian Upton. I'll admit him now. Welcome, Mr. Upton. You're with the Environmental Advisory Board.
Oh, hello. How are y'all tonight?
Hi,
Well,
Brian.
thank you.
Good.
My name is Katie Schaff. I am the Vice Chair of the Environmental Board. Thank you for your letter to us. Can you tell us a bit about your project, please?
Sure. What we're looking at is to try to develop a small convenience store along Old US 1 at New Hill, Olive Chapel Road. It would just be a store with 5 fuel pumps, be a car on each side of the pump, so 10 fueling stations. From our pre-application meeting a couple of weeks ago, it was discussed about moving the driveway to New Hill Olive Chapel Road to the north to get it further from the intersection, which would probably actually be a little bit of a benefit because the developer of this property would like to be able at some point to either sell or lease off some of the remaining property for some kind of future development to be determined. He hasn't tried marketing it to anyone yet, so it's a little unclear what else would go on here. Possibly some sort of little strip center, maybe a restaurant. Again, just to be determined what would draw the interest here. That's sort of the overall gist of what we're trying to do.
Okay.
And the square footage on the current proposed building is 4,600 square feet. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, I see a lot of proposed uses, but at this point, you don't feel like you have any sense of what uses.
Yeah, I talked to him recently, and he just doesn't know yet. Like I said, he hasn't tried to market it. He wanted to. His main goal right now is to get this store operational, and then as part of building this store and the driveway connections out to the roads, he would create, I guess, essentially like an out parcel pad for some kind of future development.
Hmm.
I see that you've spoken, or in your comment letter already, there have been mentions of solar power on top of this particular building.
Yeah, that's something that he's talked about exploring, or even if he doesn't install it initially, probably at least trying to put some provision in where he could come back in the future and add it. Again, I think it's going to come down to overall cost of the developing the land and what his budget will be, if he'll be able to do the solar now or sometime in the future.
Okay. Can you go through, I see 4 proposed zoning conditions here. Can you go through them with us, please?
Sure. Yeah, I guess the first thing was the increase the design storm pre and post attenuation rate, so that we would control the 25-year storm event in our stormwater basin. As part of what we're doing, we would also go ahead and try to allocate some maximum amount of impervious area for future development as well, so that we would know and just wouldn't have to come back and rebuild the stormwater basin as the rest of the property is developed. So we would try to make that as large as possible from the start. The second item would be planting the deciduous shade trees along the southern side of the building. Again, I think that would help just from overall operations of his site. Won't have to run his air conditioner as much in the summer. Let's see, the third one, we've already talked a little bit about the solar. And then the fourth item would be his outdoor lighting. The plan would be to put in LED fixtures so that they could be focused directly towards the ground to minimize the amount of light spillage. LED seems to be the way to go and is a lot better than the old form of lighting. I think that covers our proposed zoning conditions.
Are there members of the board who have questions?
With regard to the outdoor lighting, there's not just the focus of the light towards the ground, but there's also can be issues with glare. Are you willing to commit to reducing the emission of blue light in the lighting that you install?
We can certainly try. I'll bring this up with the developer, but I would think that that's something that we could probably try to achieve.
May I ask just a quick question? This is Shelley with the Planning Department. John, when you said reducing the emission of blue lights, are you asking for them to change the color temperature of the LEDs, or are you simply asking to make sure that there's no glare or anything leaking out the side?
Well, a little bit of both. Primarily, I think reducing the color temperature, because that would seem to take care, for the most part, the blue light issue.
Okay. Then I think that the dark sky stuff was 3,000 Kelvin, and we talked about a possibility of 3,500 Kelvin. Brian, would you all be willing to commit to lights that are in that color temperature range?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
So lights no greater than 3,500 or lights no greater than 3,000?
The recommendations checklist includes 3,000, but I know we have talked about 3,500. So I think that would be up to the board.
John, go ahead there. What?
My preference would be 3,000.
That would be my preference too. I think when you get like 3,500 and above, you start getting into a brighter white, trending towards daylightish.
I think we can make that recommendation at 3,000 with a caveat that if that is impossible, then our next recommendation is 3,500.
Okay.
I think this is Mike Rusher. I think that makes sense. I mean, I'm always on the lookout for these transitional areas, and like 2 blocks up the road is that little Triangle gas station, and a little bit closer is the New Hill post office. But I think as you drive down Old Highway 1, you've got little tiny old businesses kind of spotted into widespread residential. The lower lumens, I think, would just help fit in a little bit better. I had one question as far as the buffers go. There's really not that much frontage on the buffers that go up against New Hill. And I think you can hear my 2-year-old in the background. I apologize. So on New Hill and Old US Highway 1, there's not too much in that little buffer area, less you go to the southwestern part of the C-store map that we had up before. There are some like what appear to be super old trees, like, probably, I don't know, 4-foot diameter. Right. Hold the mouse right. Yeah, right there. And I'm not sure how those line up with the drive, but that's really, the greenery that's farther down to the southwest is not those. That's kind of like bush, new growth. Nothing really to preserve there, but those huge, tall ones, I think, I'd like to see some. One of them is actually like dead, if you look on street view, but the other ones seem to be hanging on. I know those. If there's not a reason to take them down, I think part of what we're looking for is an effort to preserve native trees within the buffer. I think that would be a good show of support for and from the board as part of this project.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we can do our best to kind of work around it. Some of it may be dictated where the driveway finally ends up, and as we work through with DOT on its placement. But I think we can try to save those as best we can.
I'd just like a clarification. Is the RCA for this site going to be made up entirely of those street buffers? Is that the plan?
Well, I guess we have the street buffers, and then we have some perimeter buffer, I guess, along our north and west sides. It shows on the, I guess, the site plan that we had done. We do indicate, I guess, there's a 40-foot maybe type A buffer there. Is what we had shown as part of our plan.
And so all those collectively would get you your 25% RCA?
I think so. I'd have to go back and run the numbers, but that should probably get us pretty close.
And this might be a question more of the staff. I noticed there was that encroachment issue that looks like there was some erosion. Does that area qualify as RCA since that happened, or?
Are you referring to this general area?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a section in the UDO that allows for planted RCA. I can actually, at a later time, I can show you the calculator that we've set up for doing that. But it's possible that could be done and used as RCA if it was planted back correctly. Generally, for every 200 square feet, they have to plant essentially, and this is boiling it down a little bit, but essentially one large tree and 2 small trees in that area. And that's assuming that is not bounded on any side by concrete so that the roots have a chance to expand. So in that particular situation, I can hazard a guess, but they'd be able to plant it back if they decided to, and that should probably fix the erosion issue. Okay, there would probably be some engineering that would have to happen. Somebody would have to get back there, but they wouldn't be allowed to take machinery through the RCA section in order to do that, because if you take heavy machinery back there, you're damaging the roots and you're also probably taking out saplings. So any planting or engineering would have to be done by hand or by accessing the neighbor's property if they allowed that.
Yeah, I noticed there might be some riprap in there too, so I was just curious.
Yeah, and some of that is information that once we get out and do a full field topographic survey of the property, we can kind of help identify, exactly where that area falls, in relation to the property line and buffers, and how we can try to amend that if we can.
And also, I apologize, just for clarification, these proposed zoning conditions would apply to both the C-store as well as the whatever additional structure?
I would assume so. I guess as far as the solar part goes, that would probably more apply to the C-store, depending on if he sold or leased. Again, just depending on who the tenant might be that would come in, if they would be able to accommodate the solar. That'd be the only part with that.
Brian, if you don't intend for it to apply to all the buildings, then you'll need to be very specific when you write the zoning condition, because it goes with the land. So if, for example, that he's able to accommodate, and I'm throwing a number out here that is just off the top of my head, so please don't quote me, a 3,000 kilowatt system on the top of his building, and he wants to do that, you'd have to be sure he wants to do that. Then you could say something like a minimum of 3,000 kilowatt hours will be installed, or whatever number I said just a minute ago.
Okay.
And then he could fulfill that condition entirely on his own. Alternately, you could have it set up, say that phase 1 of this project will or the first building built will have X amount of solar or that kind of thing, or will be pre-wired for solar. It's just an FYI.
Okay.
But when this gets submitted, staff will work with you on that.
Okay.
Suzanne, was there a recommendation that you wanted to make about that one particular part where there was erosion?
No, I was just curious if that was going to get counted as RCA and how that might affect things, being that they do have to have a certain percentage. And if they were already planning on it, could it actually be included? It was more of a curiosity.
Do other members of the board have other questions or recommendations? So I think, to summarize, and Megan will help me if I'm failing to summarize accurately, there's the 4 proposed zoning conditions, Brian, that you made before the meeting. There's a further recommendation to reduce color temperature of the outdoor lighting to 3,000 Kelvin if possible, otherwise 3,500, and to keep the old trees on the south side of the property.
Okay.
Would a board member like to make a motion to approve those proposed zoning conditions, or to recommend those proposed zoning conditions?
Mike Rusher, I'll make that motion to approve with those recommendations.
Thanks, Mike.
I second it. This is John Garrison.
Thank you, John. I will vote aye. John?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Mary Lee?
Aye.
Great. Those recommendations are approved. Brian, thank you very much for chatting with us.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, there is someone who's really excited to have actual time for open discussion. No, there is.
Before we get there, can I ask a quick question?
Please.
Who made the motion on the last one?
Mike did, and John
Awesome.
seconded it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's what I thought.
I'm ready. I know someone's been storing up something for open discussion.
I have 2 things.
Great.
Actually, 3 things. Is that okay?
By all means.
So I know sort of the procedure has been, we get the projects and the staff comments, but in the Kelly Woods case, like the TRC stuff came in after the date for which we were asked to provide comments to Megan and the applicant. So at that point, is it better just to write them out or just address them during the meeting? Like if we had additional comments for the applicant.
Megan,
what
I'm
I'm
going to need
saying?
some of your feedback. I do see exactly what you're saying, and sometimes the timing of that is just not possible. You can try to email them to us and see if we can get you back a response in time. For the comments for staff, if you have clarifying questions for staff, I think it might be easier for us to get you back some kind of response. And unless you want to bring up questions before we admit people for that particular project, then you won't really have a chance to ask that question of staff. That's assuming you don't want to bring it up in front of the developer. If it's something that you're comfortable bringing up in front of the developer, I don't see that there's necessarily an issue with bringing it up. I can tell you that the other boards in town do that on a regular basis. We try to encourage them to send us any complicated questions or the kind of random thing that might take somebody aback a little bit, just so that we have a chance to look into it and get an answer. But we also, the other boards also will frequently still ask those same questions of us in the meeting to make sure that the applicants and the citizens know the kinds of things that they're thinking about. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. That's very helpful. Thank you.
As far as the developers, I don't think that we really have enough time, based on conversations that we had earlier about the timings of these things. So you would probably just need to make notes to yourself and ask any questions during the board meeting. Does that sound reasonable, Megan?
Yes, and Suzanne, in the case of Kelly Woods, I apologize. I think that was my mistake. So I do own that. I think that they submitted the comment letter March 5th, and I didn't get that to you until I think just yesterday. So I will do better about that to check, especially before that kind of limit date of that Tuesday night to receive comments. I think that, to respect the time of the applicants and the developers, it is the reason why we set that Tuesday stop date for questions and comments. I don't see any harm in sending questions or comments after that time. I can forward it to the developer, but we might not have time to receive a proper response. So that's all I would expect from that. But I don't think there's any hard rule where you can't send any questions or comments.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Okay.
Yeah, that's also something that happens with our other boards in town as well. Is, sometimes a council member doesn't take a look at their packet until late, or a planning board member, and they send an email. And if nothing else, it's something that the applicant can address at the hearing. So.
Okay, something else I wanted to bring up, and I don't know if this is appropriate for us or not, but on that Facebook page that is promoting the dark sky stuff in Apex, a resident named Barbara Collins suggested that the town maybe could provide tips, like in their water bill or in some other fashion, on how to be a good light neighbor. And I just thought that was like a really good idea and had never occurred to me, because, we're sort of promoting that with developers, but it's not really being sort of addressed with residents. And I guess it came up because on the night that it was really foggy recently, somebody had gone outside their house and the neighbor had their floodlight on, and it was just, scattering light everywhere. And there was conversation about how people just may not even realize that their light is escaping their property. So I just wanted to bring that up. I thought it was kind of a good idea. I don't know if it's in our purview to suggest something like that or not.
Megan, Suzanne, this is John. I like that idea myself, and I think it's clearly within our purview to at least ask that something be put on the town website about it. That's another thing for the town to actually do it. But.
It also, Suzanne, could be an opportunity for us at something like Peak Fest or another day like that. Perhaps we create a flyer with information and recommendations, and we distribute that.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
I do too.
Val and I are also currently redesigning the sustainability webpage, and we plan on having many, many educational tips and resources on our page. So that's absolutely something that we can include.
That's great.
I think the town has done a good job of having information available on its website. I'm not sure everybody looks at the town's website to check that stuff out. So I think it would be be a good idea for us to maybe participate in Peak Fest and some of those things. Maybe in cahoots with the Tree Cap and the Bee City group. I know we don't have a budget, but I mean, being able to coerce some staffer to produce some flyers, maybe. Recycling, you got a fantastic PDF on what can be recycled. I mean, we could do something interactive as well with your I've got this type of waste. Where can I dispose of it properly? You've got a little thing on the web page where you just type in like disposable battery and it tells you what you can do with it. I don't know that many people know about that, and that would be something that would be good to get out and when we can interact with folks in the town.
I think it would be great if the second year of the EAB, we started to meet our educational mission. I think that would be great. So maybe we could each send a couple of ideas to Megan of topics that we might like to produce a flyer on. I imagine, we wouldn't produce a dozen of them in the first year, right? But maybe we would do 2 or 3 and then pick 1 or 2 town events at which we would have a presence.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
May I propose that those comments and ideas are submitted to me by the next board meeting so that I can present a summarized list to you? And I'll add that to the agenda.
Wonderful.
Okay.
I second that motion from Megan.
And Megan, this is Brett. I thought I'd chime in too. Now that the Peak Fest is, if Peak Fest is the one that you guys want to target, which I think is probably the most popular one, so probably is a good one. Because it's now in September, it'll be after our current budget time period. So if there are budget requests, you may want to think about that. And I think I mentioned before about like giving away trees or getting a budget for like whatever you're talking about now with like the lights or flyers are nothing, but like if there are budget items that you guys want to have, I'm not sure if it would rise to the level of like a regular budget, but maybe if you collect them together, it might be something to think about too. Like if you have ideas for what you want to educate the public on.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Brett.
I just wanted to make a quick suggestion as well. This is Shelley again. Don't be afraid to approach outside groups for copies. If they already have a great flyer, you don't necessarily need to create a brand new one. And a lot of times they are more than happy to give you a big old thick stack of them for free. I think the planning department still has a bunch of flyers for the Audubon Society's Plant for Birds thing that they did a couple years that I emailed somebody and she said, how many do you want? And because it was from the town, she sent me something like 150. I asked for 50. And so we might actually still have some more if you all want to use them. I put them put them all around town hall and then kind of sent them off to different buildings with people at one point. So that kind of thing is also a great resource, and most of those groups are super happy to get the word out as well.
Suzanne, did you have another comment?
Oh, yeah, it was just more of a question. So I noticed with the Kelly Woods developer, he mentioned warm season turf grass specifically, and I was just wondering that sort of line item in the recommendations. It just says warm season grasses. Was that meant? Did that mean turf grasses or turf grasses and other grasses, or I wasn't at the meeting where that was discussed. And I was just curious about what the EAB intended with that recommendation.
I don't think I know the answer to that question.
I don't recall any specific types of grasses being mentioned.
Except wouldn't they just require less irrigation? Warm season turf grasses?
Okay, was that the intent? Just warm season turf grasses?
I'm guessing, but
okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I was just sort of thinking about, because some turf grasses can be very aggressive if like a neighbor is trying to make their yard more natural. So I just wasn't sure what the intention of that was. And he specifically mentioned that they were going to sod, so it made me wonder about it.
That's my best guess as to what, giving them credit that they could have been intending.
Okay.
And Suzanne, that wasn't specifically written into our suggested environmental zoning conditions list. That's something that they added on their own.
Yeah, it looked like they added the word turf, but I think isn't under ours, there's the word warm season grasses. And so
plant warm season grasses for drought resistance, right?
Yeah, okay. But that did mean turf grasses versus other decorative kind of landscaping type grasses. Okay.
I think that's the part where I'm not sure the answer.
Okay. All right.
If that's the part that you'd like us to rework, that's something that we can do.
Yeah. I mean, I do like the drought tolerance, and people are going to want yards. So, yeah, let me think about whether or not I'm suggesting that we rework it.
I think we should consider the suggested zoning condition list to be something that is constantly under scrutiny and constantly being improved.
At some point, can we, I know, not many of the rezonings have gone before council for approval, but at some point, is there a plan to sort of do a retrospective to say, okay, well, of the things that we had listed on our recommendations, what are the ones that got accepted? What do we think their impact really will be on the environment or anything like that?
Yes, 1,000 times yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a goal that all of us share. It's just too early for us to start actually meeting that goal. Do we have other items for discussion?
Well, back to what Suzanne said. I think what we need to do is make sure we keep the data though on all this stuff. We don't let that get away. It is a little early, I agree, but we still got to start, collecting the data so we'll be able to do something when we get a little more experience doing this.
Yeah, I agree, Mike here, and I think we should definitely lean on Councilman Gant as well. I know Brett, you're here on the call, but as y'all encounter some of our recommendations as they come before the council, it's going to be vital that we not only observe those meetings, but get the feedback if you all ran into some issues or modifications or something worked or didn't work for whatever reason. We're all ears as that unfolds in real time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think that this is Brett. I think that I'll be sure to kind of make note of these, and if I hear any kind of if I have thoughts or if I hear thoughts from other council members, I'll share those, and the staff can obviously document what was recommended versus what was what wound up in the final version as well.
And we can attend meetings and stare at you all with wide eyes too, if that helps.
You always can. And I think we're going to go back to in person, I believe, in April, so we can see your faces in person if you want to come, which I would encourage all citizens to attend. But yeah, definitely.
Speaking of which, we can certainly keep meeting virtually, and we will hopefully be getting 3 new members next month. But I just want to throw it out there on the table that there is an option to start meeting in person again, whether that be in April or in the next coming months.
Okay.
I appreciate that. I think maybe the best way to handle that is each of us can email you what our preferences are. So if there are people who don't want to express those to the group, you can filter through those. Some of us may be vaccinated earlier than others, or just may have a different comfort level than others. So maybe we can just express our preferences directly to you.
Yes, please feel free to email me and reach out with your preferences.
At some point, it would be really nice to meet in person again, but I would like everyone to feel comfortable doing that.
Hey, Katie, before we end, this is Brett again. I thought I might also point out that I attended a Wake Up Wake environmental forum, I guess, and our own Megan Pendell did a great job in her portion of the forum. So I thought might bring it up. If you guys saw it, I think you would agree. She did a great job.
I am really sorry that I missed it, Megan. I got your email right as it was starting, and I could not tune in at that time. But I'm sorry.
It was a bit last minute, yeah. But thank you, Mr. Gann. I appreciate that. We should be actually receiving a recording of the event, and not just with my panel, but the entire event. It was fantastic. Lots of good presentations. So I'll be sure to forward that over to you all once I receive it.
Do you have any other items for discussion?
I've got one thing. I haven't thought it through good, so forgive me. It sort of hit me when I read Megan's email about Hal leaving and the time commitment he's been putting in. I'm wondering if, and I don't want that issue to affect you, Katie. I'm wondering that maybe if when we have these pre-application meetings for rezoning, if perhaps instead of you handling all the stuff, Katie, that maybe they'd be assigned to a different board member for doing the introductions and maybe building up some first questions and all to get the ball rolling on it. That would spread sort of the workload out a little more. Just want to get folks' thoughts on that.
I feel totally comfortable if other people want to initiate questions. That feels fine.
I don't know how everybody else feels. I mean, I know you Hal put a lot of time in. I know you're putting a lot of time in, probably more than any of us. Well, I'm sure more than any of us. So I'm just trying to avoid an issue where you're going to get overloaded and have to resign too.
I feel like I'm committed through the end of this year. How's that sound? That part I feel fine with, but I'm completely comfortable. My goal when we meet with the developers, and I think this is a goal all of us share, is that everyone has an opportunity to ask whatever questions or clarifications needed.
I'm just saying that the intro of the developer and stuff, and getting that initial thing going, like what you did tonight, what Hal's been doing. maybe assign that to somebody else to handle, say, somebody would handle the Kelly Woods and then another person would do the Apex C-store, and introduce the developer and get him going on what they're trying to do. Again, this has just sort of been floating around in my head since that email came out, so I don't know how folks think.
This is Marilee, and I'd like to interject real quick. Maybe, at least this is from my point of view, because all I can do is listen to what's going on. I can't really watch. I've got my documents here that I can refer to, but some things like things being shared on Zoom right now, or team meetings right now with other people, I can't see that. So maybe if we could wait for something like that to happen until we're actually sure that we get to start meeting in person again. Because I know if it came to my time to, talk to one of the developers, kind of lead one discussion, I would be uncomfortable right now while we're still meeting remotely. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't think the kicking things off is particularly strenuous, but okay. I do feel like if anyone looks at a pre-application and feels like he or she has multiple questions or multiple concerns, if that person wants to be the one to start with questions, I'm completely comfortable with that. Does that feel acceptable to other people?
Katie, I'm also happy to do a more involved job of introducing the developers, so I can introduce them to you all by name and just kick them off with starting to explain the project, or any other introductions that you were thinking of, John. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out a way to make it a little easier on Katie and you too, Megan. I mean, you got a lot of stuff going on with this too. But I mean, my idea was just maybe to spread around the workload a little bit.
Well, I'm here for you all, so you just let me know what I can do.
Thanks. Thanks. I feel that part feels not particularly strenuous, I think.
Okay.
I think the vice chair will help once that position gets appointed as well. You remember the Hal and Katie tag team in previous meetings was a pretty dynamic duo. So.
Thanks, Mike. Do we have other questions, other concerns? Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Mike
Thanks, Marilee. Thanks, Mike. I will vote aye. John?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
Mike and Marilee, I'm assuming you're aye because you made the motions.
I'm going to mess with you. Say no.
I think you can.
I did one.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks,
Stay
guys.
safe, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.